So throughout the conflict going on in Ukraine, especially sort of the de-escalation, because it's really been going on since 2014, but really since 2022, we have at least, I think, seen Vladimir Putin threaten like the West with nuclear weapons at least 3 or 4 times, and there are others within his government who do this even more regular than him. I think it's Dmitry Medvedev. I think he's the guy who has like a TV show, is an infamous drunk. Does it practically every single day on on Russian television. But there you go. And obviously, when you hear this is quite worrying. It really is quite worrying when you hear about the Putin saying, we are going to use nuclear missiles. If you're not careful, we'll use nuclear missiles. Oh, yes. Mr. Westerner, you're forgetting we have nuclear missiles. Woo. But remember why these threats were issued in the first place. These were almost like to back up the red line that Vladimir Putin was putting down. Oh, if you send weapons to Ukraine, remember, we've got nukes. What? You're going to send long-range missiles to Ukraine? Remember, we've got intercontinental ballistic missiles with nukes on them. Remember the tanks? That was obviously meant to be a Russian red line, which again resulted in them using nuclear weapons. The F-16s as well that Ukraine now has flying started flying this summer. Also, threat of nuclear weapons. We have seen this every single time. In fact, the most recent one and the often most repeated one was if Russian soil got invaded, nuclear weapon. So, also, I think that's part of the reason why Ukraine did invade Russia, to say this Putin red line of invading Russia and and into Russia is just another saber rattle. Now, of course, I do still think we should, of course, take Russia seriously. After all, very recently we found out that they had been experimenting with, get this, missiles, but not just any missiles, nuclear-powered missiles. Yes, for some reason, Russia thought it would be a really good idea to have a nuclear-powered missile. Don't ask me why. I don't see what the reasoning behind that. Other people might like to elucidate in the chat while that might be a good idea, but I have never seen a reason as to why you would want to create, pardon me, a nuclear-powered missile. Seems a bit of a weird thing to want to make. Nuclear sub, I get. Aircraft carrier, I get. But a nuclear-powered missile, I don't know. But anyway, we're going to get onto the recent comments, not only by the ex-CIA boss, but also the ex-MI6 boss, who also makes some very interesting comments as well about Russian intelligence services and what they are doing currently operating here in Europe. And that's quite worrying. So we'll get onto these in a moment, but before we do, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there are links to the Patreon page, the One Foundation link, the Buy Me Coffee link, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on into this then. So this comes from The Guardian with the title of CIA Boss Says West Should Not Be Intimidated by Russia's Nuclear Threats. The other thing I should also bring up as well, what state is Russia's nuclear arsenal in? And before we even talk about what state Russia's nuclear arsenal in, I would go and watch what state America's nuclear arsenal in, because John Oliver a while ago did a terrifyingly worrying video about it. And if you think That's what the state of America's, nuclear missiles are in, where it is one of the most heavily funded, powerful militaries in the world and has proved it several times over, versus Russia that has had huge corruption issues, failed continuously in the field, and proved to be an absolute paper tiger, to a point where we found out recently they were actually using those strategic missiles as a normal cruise missile that America would normally send. Yeah. What real state are the nuclear weapons in Russia really like? I don't think they're very good, if we're honest. So let's get on to this. So, Western leaders should not be intimidated by the Kremlin's threats of nuclear escalation. The head of the CIA said on Saturday amid a debate over whether the Anglo-French Storm Shadow missiles should be used inside Russia. Bill Burns, on a visit to London alongside the head of MI6, said the US had brushed off a previous Russian nuclear scare back in autumn 2022, demonstrating that the threats from Moscow should not always be taken literally. Putin's a bully. He's going to continue to saber rattle from time to time, Burns said. We cannot afford to be intimidated by that saber rattling. We've got to be mindful of it, and the US has provided enormous support for Ukraine, and I'm sure that the president will consider other ways in which we can support them. Again, I think that's very true. The CIA director also said that the US was working very hard now on fresh proposals for a ceasefire in Gaza with new texts and creative formulas. The new plan being devised would help moderators from Qatar and Egypt and would hope it emerged in the next few days. However, it was unclear, Burns added, whether Benjamin Netanyahu, this is all talking about Gaza. So here we are. On Ukraine, the veteran spy chief was asked whether there was too much nervousness in Washington and other Western capitals about the risk of escalating the war and giving permission for Storm Shadows now of missiles with a range of at least 190 miles to be used inside of Russia. He said none of us should take lightly the risk of escalation, he said. And there was an actual belief within the CIA that Russia might actually use tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield in the first year of the war. And he said there was a moment, at least in the fall of 2022, when I think there really was a genuine risk of potential use of tactical nuclear weapons by Russia, Burns said. He believed that such concerns should not be taken too seriously, though. He said, I never thought we should be unnecessarily intimidated by that, he said. At the time, the Russian troops had been pushed back in the north of Ukraine and had abandoned Kherson in the south, promoting a belief that Russia might actually seek to use a nuclear weapon if a rout developed. In any event, the front line then stabilized shortly afterwards. Burns said that Joe Biden had pressed him to pass on a direct message to Sergei Navshim, the chief of Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, saying to make it very clear what the consequences of that kind of escalation would be, and that a similar approach was still in place today. So far, the White House is being very notably hesitant about allowing the use of Storm Shadow and other long-range missiles inside Russia, such as the US-made actions, despite repeated pleas from the US President Volodymyr Zelensky, including one made just this Friday. Burns did voice concern that Iran was considering on whether to supply ballistic missiles to Russia, but would not confirm whether the CIA believed it actually had done so. It would be a very dramatic escalation of the relationship between the two countries. Tehran so far has only supplied now less effective drones for Russia to use in Ukraine. Burns and his British counterpart, the MI6 chief, Sir Richard Moore, said that he never appear in public together before this surprise appearance at the London Kingswood House in Hampstead. Tight security meant that audience members were told only 15 minutes in advance who would actually be appearing. Moore said that there were, of course, more concerns that Russian spies were now becoming increasingly reckless in the UK and Europe and elsewhere as the war in Ukraine continues. He said, I think the Russian intelligence services have gone a bit feral, frankly. And that is quite concerning, where the head of MI6 is saying, oh yeah, Russian intelligence services have gone a bit feral. And he's not wrong. He's not wrong, because there have been a spate, as he brings up here, a spate of arson attacks across not only here in the UK, but in Europe as well. And if you remember on Geoscope, we talked not that too long ago about the Russian plot to assassinate the head of Rheinmetall, one of the Germany's biggest defense manufacturers. So if you've got the head of MI6 saying, yeah, they're going a bit feral, that's quite concerning. To me, that's more concerning than than like I say, Vladimir Putin rattling his saber. I do sort of agree with Burns on a lot of his what he had to say there. I think we should take it seriously, but we should also remember Vladimir Putin's a bully, and he will do this periodically. And we have seen throughout this war, Putin rattle his saber, but no nukes have flown. Even though we've passed many of those red lines, I can't count the number of how many times we've meant to have passed those red lines, but we've passed a fair few. Like I said, long-range missiles supplying Ukraine in general, tanks, F-16s. We've passed plenty of them already. And again, those were meant to be, well, ooh, that'll be a nuclear missile headed your way. But what worries me more, I think far more, because we have actually seen this, is Russian operatives performing, sabotage operations. And that's something, to me, that concerns me a lot more than anything, because it's not like the Russian intelligence services have been subtle in some cases about using certain things or certain, shall we say, substances that was, used in Salisbury, if you remember that whole incident. That would be quite concerning, very concerning indeed. But I think you'd hope maybe they'd wind them in. But when you've got the ex-MI6 chief saying, yeah, Russian foreign intelligence services have gone a bit feral, quite concerning indeed. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, like I say, links down below, Patreon page, buy me coffee link, etc., all down below. So as always, thank you very much to everyone who does support the channel. Leave a link, leave a comment, leave a like, hit the subscribe button, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.